Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. The show is the Africa Dispatches. On the Sunday afternoon, just a few minutes past 2 p.m. here in Nairobi, Kenya. It's not even Africa Dispatches, it is Africa Showdown. That is the show we normally have every Sunday, 2 p.m. here in Nairobi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you tuned in and joining us from. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and it is a pleasure to have you on board. And as the topic there suggests, as we all know, that the 77th Summit of the United Nations General Assembly is currently ongoing in Geneva. So we shall take a look at some of the things that will be happening there and what are the expectations as far as Africa and the United Nations is concerned. But before we get to the conversation, I'd like to bring us up to date with the latest news headlines. And I'll start from Kenya, and the main headline on the Sunday newspaper: Ruto Raila powers standoff. Digging in, government and opposition sides are spoiling for a supremacy contest over National Assembly leader seat, a key position that determines order of business in Parliament. Odinga's coalition say it has the numbers, but Ruto's alliance stand its ground. The story is on page 4 and 5. Waiguru beats Lenku in Council of Governors. Raise voters put them in office by secret ballot, but this election method proved too divisive for county bosses gathered in the coastal city of Mombasa to pick their leadership. Governor Joseph Lenku put up a spirited fight, but in the end, Waiguru triumphed through consensus. The story is on page 7. Hustlers fund why Kenya Kwanza goodies may not come too soon. That story is on page 10. 156 million Kenya shillings college con ruins parents' hopes. Hundreds of students who are supposed to fly abroad for further studies this month had all gone as promised. Instead, they are counting their losses. The story is on page 10. Overhead pipes that flow water to slums. An invisible hand kept vandalizing vital underground water connections to Kibra residents until one organization came up with a clever idea to fly the pipes overhead. The rest, as they say, is history. The story is on page 12. Very well. And then, of course, a pictorial just on their music festivals, and it's a photo of Limuru Model Primary School from the Rift Valley perform Aluya folk song at the Kenya National Music Festivals in Kisumu County yesterday. The week-long event that kicked off yesterday is expected to showcase the best musical and drama talent from schools and colleges. And I think the last I checked, President William Ruto was meant to be going there, but I guess change of plans as he's out of the country right now. The Sunday Standard, the main headline: Ruto Raila in battle of wits and numbers. President Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga headed for yet another clash, this time over which coalition holds a majority in the National Assembly after both sides unveiled their leadership lineups, setting the stage for showdown. That story is on page 7, 8 and 9 on the Sunday Standard. Ruto's hard drive to cut fuel prices. New administration toys with cutting taxes and margins for oil farms to yield a 15 Kenya shillings reduction per litre at the pump for the various petroleum products in October. The story is on page 32 and 33. Revealed secrets of Kibaki's wealth. Is will written 3 years after exiting office. His children are retained in succession matrix and wealth managed via a holding firm. That story is on page 4 and 5. The mystery of missing Indians and taxi driver. That is also a story on page 14. Waiguru's new COG chairperson. The story is on page 10. So that is what we have on some of the leading newspapers here in the country. So now I'd like to bring us up to date with some headlines from across the continent this afternoon. The Guardian from Nigeria: Senate to review impeachment threat against Buhari Tuesday. The story is on page 2. British monarchical tradition and the place of Queen Elizabeth II. You still find that on the headline of the Guardian newspaper on Sunday in Nigeria. The Nation still from Nigeria. PDP crisis. Wike weighs options as reconciliation moves collapse. And Tinubu to Northeast, double your efforts for me, Shetima. APC campaign council tackles NLC OB over fuel subsidy removal. I see it's a problem all over the place. Okay. We are still struggling with that here in the country. Daily news from Zimbabwe, I believe. The main headline: sanctions won't hold down Zimbabwe. That's according to Charamba. And the Standard from Zimbabwe, Mnangagwa forced to dump 2023 polls plot. Very well. And the Sunday News from Tanzania, EACOP meets standards and why Southern Circuit crucial. That is what we have. And the Citizen from Tanzania, beggars of no nation, claims by Kenyan officials that Tanzania citizens are trafficked to work as beggars in Mombasa are refuted by the Tanzanian government, leaving their origin a mystery. That story is on page 2. TPDF police defuse bomb planted at NMB. That is from Tanzania. M7 flexes muscles amid EACOP jitters. Very well. The Sunday Telegraph from the UK, Together for Granny. Okay. And the Independent also from the UK, Vigil of the Grandchildren. Truth's approach to climate crisis, beggars believe. Okay, very well. So that is what we have on some of the leading newspapers. I started with the ones from Kenya and some others from across the continent of Africa. The two from the UK. You're now up to date. Just about 2:15 p.m. here in Nairobi, East African time, and I'm joined by Daniel Wesonga, our correspondent and in-house analyst from Nairobi. Wesonga, very good afternoon to you. Very well. Go ahead.
My good brother Tarwisho Lesasina and our viewers who are catching us live from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm just from the western part of the country and more so the Nyanza region, and I'm joining you live from the road.
All right. Okay, very well. Thank you so much. And we are also joined by Samuel Tawish, journalist and in-house analyst as well from Nairobi, I believe. Samuel Tawish, a very good morning. Good afternoon to you. It's not morning.
Very good afternoon indeed to you, Miriam Ogutu from our communication headquarters. Good morning, good afternoon rather, to my brother Sean Wesonga and all our viewers watching the program in Africa and the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I know we have a topic that I want us to get into just right now. The United Nations General Assembly, the 77th Summit that is starting or already started at the United Nations, in New York. But before we get into that, a couple of things that perhaps caught your attention as we read through the newspapers, and Kenyans are shocked that with the high prices of fuel, and they're also shocked that the prices of unga has not gone down. So they've not been alleviated, and of course the new government is saying, hey, just give us time. We need to put a few things in order. I don't know what are Kenyans saying where you are, Daniel Wesonga, in line with the economy and what they're experiencing right now.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And of course, as it is, the economy has been quite tight on everyone. And of course, the removal of fuel subsidy has been quite hard hitting because, fuel and energy in the extent is actually one of the essentials of production and industry in this country and anywhere else in the world. So due to that, I believe even the commodity prices are going up. People are charging more fare than they previously charged. And also we are seeing other basic commodities going up because of the increase in fuel prices. So perhaps maybe we are more anticipating to see difficult days coming to the people, to the mwananchi, in regards to the expenditure that they're going to be spending on buying fuel, paying for fare, and also other things like the basic commodities which are produced via maybe diesel, in industrial diesel, whose price has also gone up. So,
well, we seem to have suffered a bit of a technical hitch there from Daniel Wesonga's side, but once he's able to join us.
Miriam, that is the general outlook.
Go ahead. We missed you. We lost you there for a few seconds, but you go ahead.
Yes. Sorry about that. The general feedback from where I've been in Western Kenya and Nyanza region in particular and side of Rift Valley is that maybe the price, people are very, very quite anxious, because the fare prices have already gone up. the fuel prices, the pump. Actually, as you continue going from Nairobi towards Nakuru, towards Eldoret, actually the fuel prices actually get higher. So we have a lot of anxiety that people perhaps feel that there's likely to have, maybe they are likely to experience high commodity prices, and life might be a bit difficult because you understand the pivotal role played by diesel, industrial diesel. It actually affects even the price of production, even for a matchstick, even for toiletries and other basic commodities. So the general outlook of things, Miriam, is that people are actually preparing for hard times ahead, economic hard times ahead. Thank you so much, Miriam.
All right, thank you so much. Samuel Savish, what are Kenyans saying where you are as far as the state of things right now with the new government? I know it's still too early, but still.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and I equally want to acknowledge, of course, the sentiments, rather echo the sentiments that have been brought forth by my good brother, Sean Wesonga. Because, Miriam, we all understand that the people of Kenya have had a great desire to see a change, and effectively so, affordable cost of living. And as we speak today, with the new government in place, barely a week into office, of course, just like Sean Wesonga said, there still remains that anxiety, the buildup of anxiety, and there's so much expectation from the new administration. And of course, also owing to the pledges and promises that they made in the run-up to the just concluded August general election, that the Kenya Kwanza administration will focus so much into alleviating the Kenyan populace from the issue of the high cost of living. And as we speak today, of course, you and I, and of course even the people who are watching this program, will acknowledge that, for instance, the cost of fuel, Miriam, has indeed even gone high, and that is in effect as a result of the removal of the subsidy that the previous administration had put in place just to cushion the ordinary mwananchi. And when the cost of fuel goes up, we all understand is a very major factor of production, and essentially therefore means that even the cost of other basic commodities will eventually or naturally really go up, and that is the situation that Kenyans find themselves in. It's a kind of a precarious situation, and even as you say, even as we will maybe want to appeal and say maybe we give the new administration time to try and put their house into order and see how they are going to navigate out of this very serious problem that the Kenyan people are facing. Because, Miriam, away from the issue of the fuel cost, the electricity cost, and Miriam, there's also that question of of course, the basic commodities. You talk about unga, for example, the maize flour, talk about the cooking oil and other essentials that most households use every now and then. They are all but at a high cost as we speak today. So the Kenyan people are apprehensive. They're waiting with bated breath to see what does the new administration has in place, what kind of strategies or plans they have. Really, are they going to implement? Because they said they have a plan. They said they have a strategy. They said they have an agenda to try and reduce the high cost of living in this country. So we wait to see how they are going to navigate themselves and cushion Kenyans from this difficult situation that we are facing as a country.
Mm-hmm. All right, and another conversation that I'd like for us to have, and then we get into the United Nations General Assembly 77th Summit conversation, which is our main topic this afternoon. There is a battle that is looming now, and President Ruto and Azimio leader Odinga headed for yet another clash, this time over which coalition holds a majority in the National Assembly. Azimio is insisting we have the majority of the numbers, and the other side is insisting we have the majority of, yes. So, Daniel Wesonga, how do you see this panning out?
Thank you so much, Miriam. And of course, the only way we can get the real numbers is actually by removing the independent elected members of both houses. And if we were to go by the pre-election coalitions, which are deemed valid, once the elections happened, it is quite crystal clear, Miriam, if I'm not wrong, then you can actually tell which side has the majority. So I think this push and pull between the government of the day and the opposition, between which side actually has more members or which one has less members could actually be solved by the virtue of actually eliminating the independent members of parliament and the senators. So in as much as that is concerned, I believe that is where now the registrar of political parties should come on board and be able to to set the record straight. But I believe, Miriam, this was a 50-50 election, and it could actually, in essence, be the scenario as it is at the moment. But at the end of the day, you know, the true compass that will be able to give us the direction in this are the legal entities that, like the register of political parties, which will be able to come on board and say, look, for the opposition, these are your members as per the legally signed pre-election deals. For the government, these are your members, and these is per the legally signed pre-election deals. And for the independent candidate, they don't have to take any side because they're independent. They never rallied on any political party affiliation. So, all said and done, Miriam, I don't have the right number, but if we can go to the record, we can be able to set it straight. I submit.
Very well, thank you so much. And we are joined by Dr. David Matanga. Doctor, very good afternoon to you.
Good morning from wherever I am, and good afternoon wherever you are, sorry, and evening wherever you are in Australia and in the United Nations in New York. Good morning, and all of you here, thank you very much for watching us. I'm not touching anything of the local news, and that is where we should pass. And let's go straight to the topic. Miriam, when you are ready, bring me in on the main topic.
We can just start the main topic.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to correct one version. It is too early to make any judgment to any system that takes over power. So that's all my comment I can make today. Give them 100 days. Things will come in place. There's what we are calling housekeeping and house cleaning. So Miriam, with house cleaning, housekeeping, rearrangement, you can't make a judgment. But let me generally talk about the fuel crisis. My version has been not only in Kenya, the entire Africa. Why do we produce fuel, crude oil in Nigeria, Miriam, take it to Saudi Arabia for refinery, then bring and sell to Africa? It goes to show we would not be crying about these fuel problems. We would not be crying about where do we get the fuel. No, Africa has got enough fuel. Africa has got enough crude oil. But why hasn't Africa come together? It takes me to my fund, the Sovereign Africa Fund, which we must set up. The trade that certificates which we have hanging on our walls across in Africa. You find very many offices. Miriam, when you enter an African office, you find several certificates hanging on the wall, certificate for trade, for this, for that. But there is no African country trading with each other. Trade between neighbors is very difficult. The trade between Uganda and Tanzania and Rwanda and South Sudan and Kenya, Congo, trade between South Africa and Kenya. You have to fill documents, one full box, before your tomatoes arrive in Johannesburg market. So it is something that is that we need to look at as a candidate of United Nations Security Council, as a candidate of UNGA. That is, the prices in Africa, Miriam, are killing everybody. So don't kill people. Don't harass governments in your government in Kenya. Because these things are everywhere. They are biting everybody. The countries that were prepared, are they prepared? Is Africa prepared for this long haul? That is what we need. If we can take a small break.
Okay, we seem to have lost you there. We
haven't lost me, but I was saying if we can take a small, a short break with any from Africa School of Thought, something that you think in 5 minutes or Miriam's advert, then we come back and start on the topic of Africa and the United Nations. UNGA, the 77th UNGA meeting. What next? What comes out for Africa? What are we going to do for Africa? What will Africa gain? Do we just get our fuel, waste our money, take delegations to the United Nations General Assembly when we cannot give Amazonia freedom, when we cannot give a one set of United Nations Security Council to Africa? We are 1.8 billion people, but we don't have a seat on the United Nations Security Council. Who are we? Are we second-class citizens? Did God create us second class? Nyerere would ask those questions. And he is not here. I'm asking on behalf of Nyerere. I'm asking on behalf of Kenyatta. I'm asking on behalf of Jomo Kenyatta, Obote, Sekuture, Gabriel Nasa, Amir Kaburo, Emperor Haile Selassie, Nkrumah, Mandela, Patrice Lumumba. I'm asking, are we second-class citizens in this world, Miriam? Why? And why? Why is it that we can't have a seat as permanent members? Yet they recruit our people and take them to recruit our people and take them to the war to fight. They are telling us to support Ukraine as second-class citizens. Hannah, think about it. Thank you very much. Let's come back. These are the topics we want to tackle head on. Lamenting and writing lamentation books in Africa. Oh, the fuel prices, they are going to be even worse. Don't blame any government in Africa. Whom are you going to blame? Why do you dig your, Miriam, can you tell me one thing? Why do you drill your oil, put it in a tanker ships, take it somewhere, then come and sell to your own people? Why don't you unite and make a refinery which can do it for all Africa? That's the new format of Punchline Africa TV. We are gonna go that direction, asking questions, because the dead people who created Pan-Africanism are gone. They can't speak. We, the live ones, must speak. And we are gonna speak. If we don't know democracy, then do Mali style. The generals in Mali have suspended the politics for one good 5 years, isn't it, Miriam? They are training their people how to vote, how to conduct themselves, then they release politics. For us, we have been put on a political hunger where you have to fight. We are dividing ourselves because of elections every day. While these guys are taking fuel and increasing the price of somewhere the price of fuel is determined by Wall Street in Washington and the London Stock Exchange in London. And we are here going to fight kill our own brothers of something that is done very many miles away. Let's take a breaker and come into it. Prepare for it. Wesonga should not run away from it. He should stick here and listen. It is going to be hot and hot and hot. Take a break.
Infrastructural development is one of Kenya's key economic growth pillar, which has seen massive public investment since the year 2013. It is one of the integral sectors which President Kenyatta has spent his energies on since.
Thank you very much, viewers. Today, COMESA is sitting in Nairobi to find out how free trade can unite the countries of COMESA and Africa. The trade in Africa has been a trade of cut off, cut on, put back, switch off, switch back. The common market for East and Central Africa and Southern Africa, which is commonly known as COMESA, puts us a step forward towards integration of Africa and accelerates the integration of Africa. I believe in building block by block of integration of Africa. I believe in building inch by inch, country by country, removing all the tariffs that have hindered Africa from trading freely amongst themselves. Africa's population can buy its own goods. African population can purchase, can import materials that are not needed, that are not in Africa, but can import from each other the materials that are available. This can be done without any further push, any further pull from any of the countries. You might have differences with Europe, but you can also solve those differences by uniting with Africa in order to trade with Europe. It is therefore very important for Africa and Africans to encourage such meetings, like the meeting that is attended by President Museveni, President Uhuru Kenyatta, President Lungu, President of Madagascar, and other COMESA leaders who are in town to discuss the trade, free trade amongst COMESA countries. The East African Common Market of the East African Community is one of the blocks that will build COMESA into an African free trade zone. I encourage, I support, we stand by all the deliberations that are being conducted in Nairobi. Thank you, viewers. The creation of African Continental Free Trade Area is a step forward for the African integration, and it is very much welcome both by Africans in Africa and those in diaspora. The creation of such is the only second one since the formation of World Trade Organization in 1994, and is only compared to the size that can compete if it works in Africa. 1.3 billion people will benefit out of this free trade that has been signed and endorsed by 54 heads of state. After several years of up and down in the valleys of Africa and the mountains of Africa, we finally came to a conclusion that this has to happen, which brings us to the dream of Kwame Nkrumah when he said, at least building a block by block, Africa will one day unite to stand as a united continent. But are the members of this African Union committed? Will they implement what they have decided? Today, in several countries, we see signs of xenophobia, the lack of patriotism amongst the younger generation, the lack of employment, the unemployment, the mistreatment of the young, the youth, those who need jobs, the corruption, the amount of corruption that has eaten the entire continent of Africa could hamper the free trade that we are anticipating on the continent. What measures, therefore, have African heads of state put in place to ensure that those who lag behind, those who drop out, must be penalized? We should not sign the document for the sake of documents, but we should sign documents for practical reasons that we shall implement what Africa needs today. Can it happen in our times? Is it going to happen? Is integration a mirage? Is integration worth going to happen? Will it happen? What has happened about the present blocks that have started integration process? What have they done? Is Africa integrating? Thank you. There are a number of countries in Africa that produce oil. Kenya today became one of the member states of oil producing countries in Africa. It exported its first oil, where President Uhuru Kenyatta flagged off the oil that was got from Turkana in one of the northeastern parts of this country. But is oil a curse to Africa? Is oil a curse to the entire places where oil is found? We see in the Middle East, the wars in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, in United Arab Emirates. It has developed the area in Qatar. We all have many cities, skyscrapers coming up because of the proceeds from the oil. But can Africa emulate that example and bring the same oil proceeds to make sure that it makes lives better for the people, the betterment of the people of Africa and their families and their other activities? I want to see that. But I might not be able to explain why Africa always falls a victim. Are there external forces that make the oil in Africa to become sour? Is it the competition of the oil companies, Total and Shell, BP and others that come to Africa to take the share of the oil? Simply because we have no energy, ability to be able to drill the oil ourselves, refine it ourselves. It is shocking, therefore, to go to Nigeria, for example, a country that produces third in the world for oil production, has no petrol at the petrol station. Is this not a curse? If it's not a curse, what do you call it? Thank you. Fellow Africans, since 1957, when Ghana gained independence, there has been quite a lot of political, social, economic indicators on the African continent that show that Africa has progressed from pre-independence Africa to post-independence Africa.
Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. From now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs.
66 years down the road, Africa finds itself with the first country, Ghana, having gained independence. We find ourselves still locked up, controlled, manipulated, instructed, logistically supplied, equipped by foreign powers that dictate our agenda. Africa is endowed with plenty of minerals, resources, good weather. The climate is so favorable for the growth of food enough to sustain us. But we find ourselves in countries where hunger is killing people. Hunger is killing people because most of the people have taken to arms to fight wars, conflicts. Starvation has taken the place of development. In most African countries like Sudan, South Sudan, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Nigeria, in Biafra, and north of Nigeria there is Boko Haram, Somalia in the Horn of East Africa. We have taken to conflict instead of development. Development was the key indicator. When Kwame Nkrumah made the first speech that seek ye African political unity, economic development will come automatically, he was right. The events happening in Libya today vindicates Nkrumah, vindicates Nyerere, Sekou Toure, and Nasser, the founding fathers of our Pan-Africanism. The events happening in Central African Republic, in Congo today, as the war of rebels ranges on between the rebel and the rebels and the government and the rebels vindicates the founding fathers of this revolution. Our independence, therefore, was only on paper. Our independence, therefore, was only in symbols. Our independence also was in signs. Our independence also was in boundaries. That we received our flags, but we never received full independence as by the word independence. Most of the 3/4 of African countries, French-speaking countries.
Thank you very much, viewers. And thank you very much for watching Punchline Africa TV, the Africa Showdown. The Africa Showdown is a program that looks at Africa, the events that take shape in Africa. Today, our topic, as Miriam has said and stated from her opening remarks, is Africa and the United Nations. What are our expectations at the 77th United Nations General Assembly? First of all, Africa has suffered quite a great deal as a result of declarations made by the United Nations General Assembly. What have we got out of this, Miriam, and the panel? What have we gained out from the inception of United Nations General Assembly to today? What has Africa gained? Leaders have come and gone. Leaders have spoken on that restaurant, on the podium at the United Nations, the famous gray podium. They have stood there, given honor, spoken and gone, died, left Africa still the same. Have we benefited from the United Nations General Assembly? What benefits have we got? What balance of power do we have? Have we got anything that Africa can look at that 20 years, 30 years to come, apart from programs that are prescribed by United Nations Development Program Vision 2030? It is designed for Africa. Look, everything designed for Africa. Why we Africans being designed a program? Why haven't we asked for radical reforms? Radical reforms that can change Africa, that can make Africa a better equal partner, instead of Africa being a second-class partner. When it comes to debt cancellation, to debt borrowing, when you borrow money the way you borrow. Before America borrows, you also borrow the way the America is borrowing. Miriam, and the panel, have you ever sat down and thought, why is your debt more different? Is it quite different from the American debt? These are some serious things that all of you on the panel from now onwards, we should be thinking and asking serious questions to educate our African population. What is the problem here? If Africa borrows, it has a debt. America has a debt. Britain has a debt. There are no countries that have no debts. Each country in the world has a debt, Miriam. Why is it that ours is called a special debt, special interest rate? Do you know you borrow and pay back in a special interest rate? Why? And yet we have capital. We produce the raw materials. We produce all the products, the laptops, the telephones, coltan. It comes from our continent. Why can't we now, instead of focusing, going to United Nations General Assembly, what benefits do we get? What positions do we change? What proclamations do we make? What declarations have we fulfilled? That is what we want to look at. We have gone beyond the cheap, low type of discussions. We want to come to intellectual discussions of how Africa can change. What can Africa do? What can East African integration, for example, what force can the 300 million people of East Africa give to the European? What type of competition can 300 million people, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, DRC, Congo, and South Sudan, and Somalia, what can we give to the rest of the world in terms of competition? Are there any boundaries? Why haven't we been successful? For example, Miriam and the panel, why is Africa always looked at? You make resolution 1608 of the United Nations Security Council that was made in 1961 is still on the floor of the United Nations General Assembly. Can someone explain to me why African leaders who were mandated, why the nations that were mandated to raise this resolution, why haven't we raised it? As we speak today, Resolution 1608 of the United Nations Security Council that gave Amazonia and Cameroon and gave the Amazonian people the self-act of determination has not been worked on. Tell me, as an African, why I should go to Unga and parade my suit What is it that I'm gaining from there? I'm not saying people should not go. You go. But my opinion is, why do you go there when you are not being listened to? Why are you not being listened to? Because we are not united. Why are we not united? Because the same people come and tell us, focus on politics, elections, democracy. Why do they tell us? Yet they have already, in democratic institution of 253 years, the country policing us has been democratic for 253 years. It is telling us who are only 66 years old, about there, 63 years old, when Ghana first got independence. Can somebody explain to me with a brain that is similar, that God created, that God did not take to Mathare, or God did not take to Tabika in Uganda, or to any hospital in Africa, in Lagos, if you have a mental hospital? Can anybody in Africa explain to me why? We are the same. We have a population of 1.2 billion people coming to 1.3 billion. We make everything that the world wants. But why have we not been given a slot in the United Nations Security Council? That forms the basis of our discussion. Good afternoon, Miriam.
Very well. A very good afternoon to you. And this year's theme at the United Nations General Assembly, a watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges, reflects the critical situation created by this interconnected crisis, which include the COVID-19 pandemic and its consequences, the war in Ukraine, a tipping point in climate change, and unprecedented humanitarian challenges and growing concerns about the global economy. So that is the theme of this year's United Nations General Assembly 77th Summit there. So perhaps a couple of questions that you've asked, and perhaps one of our the panelists would like to respond to. I'll start with you, Samuel Tawish.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and thank you to Dr. David Masanga for the sentiments he's brought forth. And I think, Miriam, I tend to concur with what Dr. Masanga has said fully, for the simple reason is that we've had these UN General Assemblies for the last, now I think this is the 77 as you are putting it. And there's not so much in terms of what are the tangibles, what are the actions that have been put forth in terms of what has been put written in paper. There are a lot of treaties, there are a lot of agreements, there are a lot of commitments that have just but remained on paper, but there's not so much in terms of, for example, combating, say, terrorism in the whole world, for instance. Not so much in terms of capacity building, in terms of financial aid, even to the nations that directly face terrorism threats. The issue of food insecurity, for instance, and looking into the climate change also. I mean, we have only but continued to pile more promises and pledges and commitments on paper, but there's not so much in terms of action that accompanies such kind of commitments. It's more of a demoralizing, it's more of pouring cold water on any commitment or any effort coming from the membership that really forms the UN General Assembly. Miriam, when you look into, for example, the kind of wars that various countries today are facing in the world, look, for example, the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. The sovereignty of Ukraine is actually at stake as we speak now. But the UN, these organs cannot be able to take a very substantive action or move that will otherwise confirm the kind of, I would say, insulation from any kind of attack coming from the, say, member states or otherwise. But we want to see more of action that accompanies some of these, of course, meetings that we continue to have every now and then. And as for this, as for the 77th, of course, summit that we are having this time around in New York, we will want to see even the leaders, and most of the African leaders, because Dr. Masanga has stressed so much on the need by African leaders to come forthright and speak with authority as regards to the issues that really matter to the African continent to the African people. For example, the issue of oil, Miriam. I mean, you cannot really understand how come that African continent and respective African countries today struggle even to have this very precious commodity in the name of petrol or even the oil for that matter. Speak about, for example, tea. Speak about every other sector today, Miriam. How come that the African continent today and her people continue to die of hunger? When we have arable land, when you have a very favorable climate that God has bestowed unto us. I mean, there's issue to do with policy and its implementation, and people at the policy level who are not doing the right things. And we want to see this time around through this particular summit or meeting that we are having in New York, that there will be commitment coming from every other stakeholder, every other player, and every other member to see into it how some of these very major problems and crises that the entire world and the continent of Africa continues to face are going to be addressed. Because, Miriam, again, it is not enough for us to continue having these meetings. It's not enough for us to use even more resources to convene these meetings. And I understand also there's contribution by member states, the members that form the UN General Assembly. And in that regard, Miriam, then we would want to see how these resources are going to be channeled to ensure that they are to the benefit or for the benefit of the people that really make up the members of the UN General Assembly. So it's a very, very welcome discussion. This is something that we will want to see the leadership of the African continent and generally in the world really question, that we will want to have frameworks, we will want to have timelines within which some of these key issues that have all along been signed in terms of treaties, in terms of agreements, have been actualized, have been put into action, so that by the end of the day, we are really moving forward and we are making some tremendous progress. Miriam, as we speak today, we've had timelines, for example, the visions about Vision 2020, Vision 2026, now 2030. Now we have a vision of 2060. I cannot understand, Miriam. There are some treaties and agreements and some visions that were put in place even before some of us were born, and none of them have been implemented. We continue to see them just in paper, and we are going to see even our children and our children's children really not getting any results in terms of these kinds of conventions that we continue to hold. So they should not just be for purposes of formality, for purposes of showbiz. They must be actualized so that we will be very happy and will be we will have confidence that by the end of the day, there's something that is being done at the UN General Assembly other than just the normal meetings and summits that we have year in, year out. I submit, Miriam.
Very well. Thank you so much for that. Daniel Wesonga.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And of course, I subscribe strongly to the views of Dr. Masanga David. And in African culture, Miriam, you cannot sweep the outside of the house when the inside of the house is still not quite in order. And that is why I believe before we even talk about global matters in terms of trade, industry, and integration, we first of all, have to talk about African integration. We have to make trade and industry between African countries to be more seamless, easier, and smooth. We have also to talk about what my brother Tarisha has talked about. You know, we have a lot of arable land in Africa, yet our people die with hunger. We have a lot of resources here in Africa. Dr. Masanga mentioned about the oil in Nigeria. Why haven't we been able to set up a refinery in Nigeria so that we are able to add value to the oil that comes out of Nigeria? Why hasn't Nigeria even looked for African markets before maybe trying to go to Europe and America? You know, the biggest company that mines oil here in Africa is actually ExxonMobil, which is an American company, followed closely by France, Total. You know, why can't we also have refineries in Africa so that we are able to sell finished products to these people in Europe? So to me, Miriam, I think those are the topics that we should be talking about. We should be talking about how to make Africa productive. We should be talking about how to stop the proliferation of foreign goods into our markets, and be able to see how we can be able to bring fairness in the global economic markets by actually also stepping up our export to the so-called Western powers. Because we cannot have fair trade deals if we are given raw deals in terms of being put under tariffs, whereas Africa has a potential. We produce one of the purest oil. We produce gold. We produce cobalt in Congo. We produce, even one of the best coffees here in Kenya, tea here in Kenya. But all this has to be taken in raw form in Europe for them to be added value and brought to us as chocolate, to be brought to us as, a refined tea, which you are sold, a few dollars, in high-end hotels. Whereas we can do this here in our soil, in Africa. I think those are the things that we should be talking about even before we start talking about security, because we understand who causes insecurity and proxy wars in Africa. So if that is going to be the topic of discussion on the table, then I believe as Africa, we should actually support such a conversation. Anything apart from that, anything that will deviate from whatever brings value to Africa, I think, Miriam, it won't add any value to us, even in as much as the UNGA conference is concerned. I submit.
Okay, very well. Thank you so much. And I see the war in Ukraine is part of the watershed moment and part of the conversation that they will be having there at the United Nations General Assembly. And as much as that is something that should be talked about, but we have also a very active conflict ongoing in Ethiopia. So I don't know, well, they will be looking at the unprecedented humanitarian challenges that the world is facing. I don't know if some of these conflicts in Africa will also feature in this conversation. So I shall be looking to see how that will be addressed together with other issues that the UN feels is urgent matters, because I think we do have a lot of things happening here in the continent. So it will be nice to see that that will form part of the things that will be discussed there. But I guess we'll wait and see how as that conference continues. Doc, back to you.
I'm happy on this one because I feel sad. You have about Ukraine. Ukraine in Ethiopia are dying. When Ethiopia is not, why should we talk Ukraine first? Somalia is not stable. Still have Somalia in chaos. We still have the Congo in chaos. Still have Sahara. It is being occupied. We still have Libya in divisions of Tripoli, and we still Central African Republic. Why don't we do those things? About we are giving Ukraine a lot of money, but Africa itself. But before we go to the part of it, let's look at why are we not members of the council? Why? Why are we not members of the United Nations? Africa needs to be on the security. And we are not members. 1.2 billion million. And we don't even have, we only have rotational president. We, Africa. And that problem is we, our seat on the Security Council. And that seat must. But then the Africa has, if it reaches to, if it, who says, hey, I am the owner of the seat, or who will give the, each country will want, the French gang up and say it must be ours. The French speaking will say, speaking countries will say it must. So Africa has come to the point where we must to think as a united, grab that seat, a say on the Security Council. As it is, Africans, we need United Nations Security Council. Than that, do we waste our fuel? Do we go there? I'm asking a cardinal question. You are talking of prices. The fuel should have come from Nigeria to subsidize Kenya at a cheaper rate. But Nigeria itself has no fuel. Nigeria itself has no fuel. When you go to Lenku, or people queuing fuel. Evening, you come out of the car there. Why? Medium for maybe you remind the people, you are remind the people that we are not talking about issues here of elections in Kenya. The elections have been they have gone. We don't have to talk about the way forward. Kenya has and the place decided who the president is. We don't have alternatives to that, and therefore it should be treated as it is. Wants us to discuss Kenya, I'm sorry. Of Africa, where issues that affect Africa. Want to contribute to this bigger issue that affect Africa, please. But we are not this. Oh, the Kenya, we recognize the president, and we have moved. We don't see any reason we should be.
Doc, your connection is really, really very poor.
Yes. Thank you very much. And are you hearing me?
Yeah, but it's not very smooth, so we lose you.
Okay, on those lines, and on those lines, what can we do to get? What has UN Assembly achieved for Kenya and for Africa? You extend it to Vision 2063. I don't know whether some of us will be there, but we might not be there. Also, let's look at all those. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you. We apologize for that not so good connection there, but I suppose you've been able to get a lot of the the submission that Dr. Matanga was making there. And I think one of the key things that perhaps a lot of Africans, and I think that has been underscored by Dr. Matanga and the rest of the panelists, is the need for Africa to be a part of the United Nations Security Council, the permanent seat, which right now has 5 member states, and the other non-permanent members 10. So in total, the United Nations Security Council has 15 member states. But by how Africa is today and the growth and what we see and the capacity of our people, there has been some calls that it is about time that Africa got a permanent seat as far as the United Nations Security Council is concerned. But also something else that have come up there when Doctor was making his submission is how, if this was to be the case, then how will we go ahead in even choosing, getting one country or one person that will represent this continent? I think the modalities might give us a headache there as a continent, because we know our disunity and disintegration has been our main downfall, and because of this, and some of this disunity has been, of course, planted by the external forces. This has ensured that we're not able to think as one. We're not able to look at things from the same perspective, or to look at our interests from the same perspective. We see the issue of, languages. They're playing, being a factor. The Anglophones, the Francophones, the Arabs, and things like that. We see things like religion also being an issue as far as this, this continent is concerned. So our disunity, we are divided in so many levels. How we approach human rights, for instance, how we approach governance, how we approach a lot of other factors, democracies and things like that. So from out of that, even just thinking about it, it will be headache to see and to arrive and to agree at a point where we decide, okay, fine, so this will be our representative at the United Nations Security Council. It's not impossible, but it might give us some headache there, Doc, don't you think?
Is it to me?
Yeah, and then we can go to Wesonga or to Tawish.
Miriam, you see, we have not been as people of Africa, the entire Africa, to with the United Nations voice. How many African countries are prepared to on the same wave? How many? We are not. You see, every jetting out of Africa is going with every leader jet going out.
Doc, your connection is very bad. You're not able to fully get what you're saying. So maybe I'll let you fix it and I'll come back to you if you don't mind. Because I think you're making very important points there, but we're not able to fully get what you're saying.
Okay, Miriam, now I think my connection has come because there are people who always interfere with this platform, and Stephen should look at that platform and see interference coming from people. And I've discovered, I've seen from where I am, the interference is coming.
It's better now. Go ahead.
It is better, yes. So let me, every leader who is jetting of Africa, out of Africa, going to the UN General Assembly, Miriam, does not have agenda for Africa. No agenda for each country. So when you reach there and you are trying to explain a point to Africans and to international community, because each country in the world is coming to the UN General Assembly with its own problem. But Africa, the 54 countries or 55 countries, plus Polisario Front, which is also given observer status, it must talk with one voice. But we don't talk with one voice. Look at what we have gone through. 62 10 years ago, we were promised an African passport. Miriam, can I ask you, do we have it today? We don't have. Where everybody, when I came to the studio, and I was very happy from Addis Ababa, Miriam, you were there, said I even told you, we are going to have our African passport. I think I talked about our African passport. I think we're having a show together with you that day or the following week when I just come from Addis Ababa. An African passport. Hala, up to now, no African passport. All our pictures were taken. We can't know where this African passport has gone, who has got it, or they got it, or they didn't get it. So we are not united at all. If Miriam, if Stephen can play this, there's something that I'm sending you for the production team to play. It is very interesting, and it will open up to show you how badly we are. There you are, Stephen, in the studios back in Nairobi, in the studios, in the headquarters, please. Play that, and you see, as we stabilize the network, then Tawish, we have not done badly. We shall come back and finish shortly. So prepare your points. But after this, you might get a shocker. Play that one and see.
So we do have some time now for questions from the audience. I wonder if we should just take a few, and then we can respond to them all together. So, okay.
Thank you. I have a question. What's the difference between the U.S. debt and the debt that African nations own? Because the U.S. debt doesn't keep the U.S. from being one of the leading powers of the world, but then African nations can't make it because of that debt that is strangling them.
Shall I talk? Okay. The first question is a very important question. What makes African and third world debt different from the American debt? Number one, America is never going to pay its debts. It doesn't have to. Its debts are in its own currency. We can simply print it. The African debt is not in its currency. The African debt is in U.S. dollars. Africa has to earn the U.S. dollars, and the only way it can earn the U.S. dollars is not to be assassinated for growing its own food and becoming independent and doing something that the United States does not like. The principle underlying the foundation of the World Bank, the International Bank for IBRD, research, the World Bank, is that no country should grow its own food. Africa and the third world should only grow export crops. to export in order to have an oversupply of cocoa and other tropical raw materials to keep down the price. They must buy their grain from the United States or Europe so that if they do something that we don't like, we can do what America tried to do to China in the 60s. We can sanction them. We can say, we're going to starve you. We're going to not export any grain to you. So owing their foreign debt in dollars means that they have to somehow sell something that the United States wants, not what they want. I think the most evil organization, $75,000, $85,000 Defense Department contract for me to come to explain to them how American imperialism worked, and they used it as a how to do it book. They thought it was just spontaneous, and I had written the book thinking that socialists in third world countries would do something about it, and indeed it was translated into Spanish and other languages. But it was really the Defense Department that applied most of this. And I was amazed when I was invited to the White House to explain how imperialism worked. And my boss said, we've run rings around the British imperialists. This is how to do it. You make them owe the debts in your currency, not their own. You control their central bank and make them financially dependent on you, and then you've got a stranglehold for them. So certainly the third world countries should cancel the debts under the odious debt principle. I haven't been able to convince any of them to do it because they said if we do that, the CIA will kill us. So how do you break that cycle? That's a problem I've not been able to solve.
The other thing, when you were responding to the first question, there's also something we're suffering from in Africa, the devaluation of currency as another way of
devaluation of
the currency.
Oh, currency, yes.
As a way of keeping us dependent continuously.
That's a good point. When a country devalues a currency, what are they devaluing? Well, you know, there's a world price for grain, a world price for aluminum, a world price for raw materials. The only thing that they can really devalue is the price of their labor. So when Africa or Latin America or Greece is told to, or America is told to devalue the currency, what that means is pay labor less. You have to squeeze out more to pay the top of the economic pyramid, to suck it all up to the top 10% or 1% or 0.1%. So devaluation is basically an anti-labor policy to prevent a domestic market and prosperity from developing. That is why China and Russia are saying, we don't want to be part of the dollar area. We want our own currency, and we'll only borrow in our own debt. Last time I went to China, it was a little annoying because they insisted in paying me in yuan, which all these little red bills that you have to go to a bank to turn in, and yet they said, well, we're following your advice. What do you complain about? So what could I do? It's a good idea, but at least they don't want any part of American sanctions.
Very well, Doc.
You have listened to the tape. You can see the differences in analyzing the African debt. What they call African debt, is it different from the US? You borrow from the same place. So this goes on until you reach the United Nations General Assembly. Even the leaders, the way they speak, we are all in the UN. But the leadership, what they are called, when some African heads of state go to UN to speak with two people in the General Assembly, in the hall. Two people in the hall. You get my point? Two people and their delegation. Small, if you have gone with your 5 ministers, 10 ministers, they are the people. There's nobody in the hall. Nobody is listening to you. So time has come, maybe We even do this thing virtually to save money. Is it cost effective? Is it cost effective? Tell me. You are speaking to two men seated, maybe a delegation that likes your country. Only two of them, two delegations sitting there. And you are reading a speech of 1 hour. They are going to begin reading speeches up to October, each day. It shows some, after 77 years, there must be reforms. That's what I'm talking about. You can't be talking to the hall, which you can do from internet, from Zoom, where we are, like where we are in Nairobi, we can do a Zoom conference. Africa can save the money. Because people are going to listen to you. How many? Your own ambassador and others who came with you. I've seen some delegations like that. Haven't you seen those delegations? Yeah, so there is some inequality in the UN General Assembly, starting from Resolution 1608 of Amazonian people. It has never been implemented. We come to resolutions passed on Western Sahara. It has not been implemented. We come to resolutions implemented by Palestinian people. They were given status after how many years? Over 40 to 50 years struggle. We come to climate change, which is one of the dockets that I am interested in to follow in this General Assembly. Even if I sit at night and listen, I want to listen to the speeches of climate change. And by virtue of that, I think President Uhuru Kenyatta and the President William Ruto of Kenya, they hold the presidency of the docket of the climate change section of the United Nations. So most probably that is what affects every human being. That is one of the things, Miriam, which now unites all of us. When you talk about mudslides, killing all our people in our areas, back in our countries, is when everybody wakes up to say there is a problem. So climate change is real. It unites us. But on other political matters, we are second citizens in the UN. We don't have a voting right. Okay, Russia is fighting other countries. He's a member, permanent member. And if you pass a resolution in the General Assembly condemning Russia and forwarding the name of Russia to the General Assembly, to the Security Council, it will veto. China will follow.
China will support the veto, yes.
Yes. So, isn't it time for the UN, for Africa to ask those questions? That is, someone here on the panel should break for me. As time goes, we're about to finish. Break for me. Isn't it time that we should think this country's veto, if it doesn't sound well to him, even if he has killed Ukrainians, he veto. He will veto. But how many African countries are able to veto if ICC is coming to your country? Can you veto? I'm asking a question here. Can we veto? Because I can see people, some people, Miriam, on chat, talking about these things, but they don't know.
No, only the 5 permanent members have the veto power.
Yes, so we can't veto. So what are we in this building? We are second class. You can't veto. If they say ICC is coming to your country, they will just collect you like a small dog on a plane. Even if you have an African head of state, they will take you in jail. But can you go and collect Mr. Bush when he's flying around? Try him, the whole machinery will come. So it is time for reform. There must be a reform agenda where Africa must have a say. That's what my submission is.
Very well, thank you for that. Samuel Tawish.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and thank you, Dr. Masanga, for those remarks. Indeed, Miriam, I tend to agree with wholesomely with what Dr. Masanga said, because again, we all must acknowledge that this UN General Assembly platform really offers us an avenue or an opportunity to be able to address some of the most pressing issues in the world, and more so the shared challenges that affect each and every one of us. From the global security, the global food security, to global health crisis. Even as we talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, it's something that now is not even discussed as it were, like you will say 2 years or so back. Miriam, these are some of the shared crises or challenges that we face globally as a member of the global community. And when we get such kind of a platform, we will want to see what the commitment of the participants, what the commitments of the member states, what is the commitment of the first world really has in terms of trying to help the whole world in addressing some of these challenges that we are facing. Therefore, I hope this is one of those platforms that really offers us an opportunity to be able to determine how we are going to deliver on the mandate. The mandate and giving solutions to the some of the challenges that continue to face even the institution itself, the UN General Assembly itself, because it is also having its own challenges. Because when you talk about an institution which has been set up so many decades ago, and as we speak today, it has not been able to rise to the occasion and be able to adequately address the issues that it continues to discuss every year in, year out. So that is also some of the challenges that we want to see really being discussed, because it's not only about how much they're contributing to climatic change, how much they're contributing to dealing with the issue of food insecurity in the world, how much they're contributing in terms of dealing with the threat of terrorism in respective countries, or even globally, and there's so many of the myriad challenges that we continue to face as members of the global community, but also what are some of the setbacks that the UN General Assembly itself is really facing in terms of the lack of capacity to be able to address the issues that we continue to talk now and then. Because the general understanding, Miriam and the panelists, and of course all the viewers who are watching this program, is that we would want to see an institution that is fully committed and is fully committed and has action-oriented plans in terms of the any kind of commitments that it has on the agreements and the treaties and all kinds of things that they agree when it comes to these meetings that we continue to have. There's that very fundamental thing that Dr. Masanga has mentioned, the issue of the UN Security Council, for instance. This is also something that as African people, we must be able to use such platforms to petition and ask, of course, the UN, how come that the African continent does not have even a single representative in the UN Security Council, when in effect, Miriam, the membership that makes a huge majority in the UN Security Council really even comes from the African continent. And you'll struggle to understand how come that we cannot have a single member as a permanent member of the UN Security Council per se. It's something that really it's mind-boggling. You really need to question such kind of what is the rationale that the UN Security Council or the UN agency uses really to be able to award or even give these positions or membership to these member states. So some of the critical issues that we will want to see our leaders, when they go to these particular summits, they should be able really to bring such as a part of the agenda, as part of the issues that must be discussed. Because again, as a people of the African continent, we feel like we are getting a raw deal. We are feeling like genuinely so that we are being shortchanged. Because apart from having a huge majority of the UN Security Council, we do not have a single permanent membership in the UN Security Council. And Dr. Masanga has said it all. I mean, today, if, for example, the international organs like the ICC or otherwise they will want to have an intervention in the African continent, you can imagine that we do not have any member from the African continent with a veto power to be able to determine the fate of such kind of actions that will be taken by other, of course, other nations or other states. So they will be making decisions that have far-reaching ramifications onto the people and the continent of Africa. In effect, when we do not have any representation or anybody who will give a contrary view or observation or opinion as to the ramification or the implications of the decisions that are being made at the UN. So it's very, very important. We want to see all these things being discussed, but away from the discussions, away from these summits, away from signing treaties here and there, away from the normal commitments that we have seen them say during these forums, we will also want to see them really have actions accompanying this kind of agreement, so that by the end of the day, the people globally can be able to feel the effect and the impact, positively so, of the UN General Assembly. I submit, Miriam.
Very well, thank you so much, Daniel. Wesonga, you parting short.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And of course, my words cannot be further from what Dr. Masanga has stated. And of course, he has been able to exhaustively discuss the subject of the conversation. And my good brother, Tarisho Lesasina, has been able to add the icing on the cake that let this conversation at the UN be about the betterment of the African continent. We cannot talk about Africa when Africa is not on the table. You know, they say that if you're not on the table, then as well you might be on the menu. So if Africa is not granted a permanent seat at the UN Security Council and the General Assembly, then I think the time that as Africans, we take a step back and we actually reevaluate and be able to meditate on this kind of relationship we have at the UN. Because Miriam, in terms of population, Africa is ahead. We've been able to catch up in terms of even intellectual capacity. We've been able to catch up even in terms of other maybe parameters that could be used as the yardstick for us to be able to be given a recognitive seat at the UN table. So I believe, Miriam, this is our next course of action. Apart from maybe talking about trade, industry, and integration, we should also talk about Africa's position when it comes to the UN Security Council. And it should be a permanent position, Miriam, because Africa has been a critical player in the global security matters. You know, when we talk about combating terrorism, Africa takes the front lead. When we talk about even the strategic, military training bases, Africa has been on the forefront. So why have we been having partnership when it comes to the military, practice and all that, and the counterterrorism efforts? Whereas now, when it comes to having a seat at the UN Security Council, we are told now to take a back seat, and other countries which do not even have the capability or maybe the strategic point to be able to be put ahead of us. So let us go to this conference with a holistic mindset where we say Africa has to get its rightful position, be it in trade, be it in industry, be it in integration, be it in matter security. And with that, Miriam, we shall come back home so proud that we've been able to broker a deal that works for the African people, a deal that will be able to take the African continent to the next level, a deal that will put us to the same level, an equal level with the Western powers, what we call the first world. They might be ahead of us in terms of the infrastructural advancement and civilization, but we are also ahead of them in terms of resources. So let it be a give and take kind of a relationship, not an exploitative kind of a relationship where Africa is there to provide resources, but when it comes to important matters in regards to decision making, we are put on the sidelines. So to me, Miriam, as I said in my parting shot, let it be an all-inclusive, let it be a summit where we shall be able to bring Africa a fair share of the bargain. I submit.
Very well, thank you so much. Doc, is there anything else you'd like to add to what has been said as we conclude the conversation this afternoon?
Miriam, I just want to thank all of you for having attended and for having said quite a lot of points. I want to thank Tawish. I want to thank Daniel. I want to thank you also for having been leading us on the panel. We shall have further discussions on Tuesday at 11 o'clock with Matanga Africa Perspective, the beginning of the show that talks about Africa. And therefore, on Tuesday, 20th of September at 11 p.m. East African Standard Time, and East African Standard Time and other times of Africa and the region globally, we shall discuss, the topic is going to come out. We shall be looking at what reforms are needed by what reforms are needed in the United Nations. We want to see the reforms as Unga starts. How many people in the world will be able to know that they feel like a one community? Is it only Africa that we target? Is it the third world that also has a share? How much is the share for Africa? Why is it that most of the programs designed in the UN, Miriam, are designed for Africa? Why is it so? Why is it that Africa is targeted that, okay, Vision 2030 for Africa? Surely, don't you think there's something very strange? Are we the only poorest people on the continent, or in the universe? There are times when you give a student marks, mark him low. The student will come to a point to ask, am I the only dumb man in the whole class? And there are no other students who get 30 marks out of 100. Tawish, I don't know how you think about that, briefly, jokingly. Why have we been marked that everything designed in the UN is designed for us? When it comes to peacekeeping, Miriam, it is us. Have you not said that? All the troops for peacekeeping are sent to us.
Maybe because
to Africa.
Because we have more conflicts, I don't know.
Why?
That's
don't you think there is a reason why we have been kept on tiptoe, on our tiptoes? So let's reason this. Let's bring this down. Let's bring the curtain down. Economics of Africa is the strongest. We produce coltan, which is this telephone. All of us have these telephones. Without Africa, there would be no telephone. But now, why is it that when it comes to peacekeeping, it's Africa? The biggest number of peacekeepers in the world are in Africa. They are in Africa. You see that? Why? That's what we want to see. And probably we shall find answers one day, and one day alone, that Africa will rise and shine. This is a conversation that you cannot ignore. This is a conversation that goes on and keeps on going on and going on until we find a solution to it. This is a conversation, perhaps, that people should think about as they sit in their homes. Let me do a takeaway. Unless there's something that everybody has to say, I can do. If there's anything, Tawish, do you have any comment?
Not for now, Dr. Masanga. I think you've exhausted, and also when you're about to give the last submission, I don't think it will be necessary for me to make any more commentary.
No, you could just have a word to say thank you very much, bye-bye. Any comment, Mr. Daniel Wesonga, who is on the road all the way near Migori? Daniel?
Thank you so much, Dr. Masanga. To me, I think maybe just being genuine, I would say this is racism in the midst of the UN. You know, because if we were actually able to send, to participate actively in the security matters of the UN, why then would they, sideline us when it comes to the important decision-making organ of the same body? But as you can see, when you go to Congo, full of the UN mission, troops. When you go to Central Africa, they are actually there. When you go to parts of Southern Africa, volatile regions like Mozambique, get them there. So I believe, Dr. Masanga, we still have some kind of subtle racism happening in this at the center of the UN. You have seen also in other areas, conflict regions in Africa, where even the UN itself has taken time before it intervenes, until thousands are butchered by rebels or maybe fighting groups. It is when they come later. We've seen that happening in Congo. So I believe if it is not racism, then maybe someone will have to convince me otherwise. I submit.
Okay, thank you very much, Miriam. Any comment before I go to takeaway?
Not really, just go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, this is my takeaway, or our takeaway. The United Nations was formed after the Second World War for the purposes of maintaining international peace and bringing together countries that were willing to join the United Nations so as to safeguard the interests, the sovereignty of those states within the United Nations Charter. Since its formation, the United Nations has done misses and targets. It has targeted spots where there are conflicts. Some have been removed from the planet. Some still exist. But what significance is it to the African continent? What is the significance of United Nations to the continent of Africa? Isn't it time for us in Africa to demand very serious demands that we also need a slice of the United Nations General Assembly and United Nations Security Council? There are 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council that make decisions on behalf of the entire universe that God created. And these members have got a veto. Africa has no veto. But these members can decide who should be taken to where, located to where, removed to where, stopped from going wherever he wants to go. Isn't it time for Africa to sit down and look at the way things go, the way things are happening on the continent? Unite and go and demand a slot, a cake, part of it, that you also need to be on the United Nations Security Council. Time and time again, leaders have gone to the United Nations General Assembly, which is commonly called as UNGA. You hear of foreign diplomats and diplomats across the African continent in all ministries of foreign affairs preparing for this big event of the year. Apart from solutions prescribed by the United Nations for Africa, is there solutions that Africa prescribes for United Nations? Isn't it time to change? That we as production units, the producers of raw materials, which make 3/4 of what the world wants. Isn't it time for us also to prescribe what is supposed to be done for us, instead of solutions coming from UN to Africa? It looks like it's Africa only the continent among the continents that has been targeted. When you look at United Nations Vision 2030, now United Nations Vision 2060, it is still targeting Africa. Why? Africa hosts a huge number of peacekeepers. United Nations peacekeepers. Are we the people that were created to have only war that keep us, drain most of our money, presence, resources, both ecological, environmental degradation of this continent? Look at what has happened in Congo. They have been keepers for as many as from 1961. Peacekeepers, when Patrice Lumumba died, was killed. Peacekeepers have been in Congo. They have never left. They go, they come, they change the names. What can we do to stop this type of labeling that Africa is a continent where you must take peacekeepers in order to maintain peace? Is it because we like conflicts? The answer is no. The conflicts are manufactured, prepared, engineered, supplied, equipped logistically from the metros of Europe and America, because of the diamonds, the gold, and other things that are found on this continent of Africa. Conflicts in Mozambique, conflicts in Central African Republic, conflicts in Libya, conflicts in Somalia, conflicts in Tigray, in Ethiopia. All these conflicts add up to a very volatile situation on the continent of Africa. Isn't it time for us to ask for reforms that can give Africa a chance to say yes or no? Otherwise, now we have no alternative but to accept everything the United Nations Security Council imposes on us. Fellow Africans, that is my contribution as an African, a Pan-African. Thank you, Punchline Africa Television. Thank you, all of you. God bless.